I am compelled to do a response to the Majority Report. I never liked this guy, Sam Cedar. I mean, he does some good reports, but this is not Sam Cedar. This is his friends at the Majority Report giving us an attack on Jimmy Dore.
I'm not necessarily defending Jimmy Dore. I'm just talking about the larger contradictions and the larger things that we can learn from the conflict between the supposed majority, which is not so Majority Report, and Jimmy Dore.
Talking about the Italian Prime Minister here, arguably the most brilliant analysis I've heard on this subject at 25 minutes. The way he delivers it, it's superlative. Okay, that's why we call it creeping fascism. Let's take a look. What's the big deal here? Let's take a look.
Let's actually just do this Jimmy Dore thing right off. Jimmy Dore weighed in on the election of Giorgia Meloni and the far-right extremist Brothers of Italy party being the dominant party in this right-wing coalition in Italy. And this segment is just beyond stupid, and you might have to just take some notes to keep track of all the logical leaps that happen here. Essentially what Jimmy's trying to say is that...
Remember what she says. This segment is beyond stupid. Now, I'm going to even take it even further than the stupidity that we're going to be seeing here. I'm going to be really explicating what is the beyond stupidity that we're talking about here.
The United States and Europe, due to having COVID vaccine policies that are designed to protect people, have forced people like Meloni and Ron, forced people into liking Meloni and Ron DeSantis because they are being driven away from authoritarianism on the left with COVID passports. At the same time, though, he tries to make the case in this video that Meloni is not a fascist. So the true authoritarians are on the left because of COVID, even though we currently have pretty much zero.
So what we're talking about explicitly is COVID, but what we're talking about implicitly is the increased carceralization of our media every day with regards to increasing security for minority groups. They are increasing surveillance state. They are increasing all of the Patriot Act kind of things are being, or Patriot Act 3.0 kind of things are being pushed by the left today. The left today that is continuously vicariously traumatized. The left that sees racism and sexism and lions, tigers, and bears behind every corner. The left that is constantly traumatized, the left that is constantly vicariously traumatizing all of us, the left that doesn't realize that trigger warnings are triggering, the left that doesn't realize that the students, when they take a test, they have two groups of students, control group, non-control group. One group, they do the test and everybody gets average grades, it doesn't matter. The other group, on top of the test, they write down your gender, sexuality, or gender, and race or something like that, and because of their gender or race, it changes the test results, because if you're reminded that you're a woman, then you do worse on the math test. In fact, sometimes they do that test, then they remind themselves that they're Asian, and then they do better on the math test, ironically. So the narcissistic social constructionists that have taken over every aspect of our institutions, these vicariously traumatized people, are so narcissistic that they think that they can go out and socially construct for the future, when in fact, just because something is socially constructed doesn't mean that you can go out and change it. That's just a narcissistic perspective. And we talked about how intersectionality promotes a hive mind, makes the narcissist come up and be the most able to speak. For some reason, when we talk about like social constructionism, we don't talk about academia as also being a main player in social constructionism. Of course, colonialism has always been site within the university. The university has been the main emanator of colonialism, from the anthropologists of 100 years ago to the progressive intersectional people today.
And so she is this is what people are saying, that she's a backlash. People voted for her, just as you pointed out, a backlash to the authoritarian COVID policies. Mm-hmm. And Giorgia Meloni so this is what Peter Sweden says. He says, Giorgia Meloni has spent the last 2 years as the only politician in Italy fighting against the COVID passports.
So supposedly, if you look at Agamben, there was an article, Agamben failed us. This is actually one of my professors, these are both of my professors, Agamben and Benjamin Bratton. They're both from the European Graduate School, where I'm a student or ex-student of or whatever. I don't really know if I'm part of any institution today. Agamben failed. Okay, why philosophy failed us in the pandemic. But in fact, Agamben was the most correct. And you have to realize who has the cancellation power, right? Agamben has been a leftist for how many years, has contributed how many books, how many works has he contributed? But of course, at the end of the day, he got canceled because he applied his biopolitics to this situation. I've actually talked about this before. Not understanding of what Foucault says about biopolitics, writes it down. Benjamin Bratton is not a very good philosopher compared to Agamben, compared to the weight of Agamben, okay? And this is the same issue here, not talked about in the philosophical circles, but talked about in the mainstream media with regards to these people. Now, the problem here that they're going to point out is that Peter Sweeten is supposedly a fascist.
People are so mad about the COVID authoritarianism that look at this, they're turning to fascism. This is not true, but that would make a bit more sense. But
No. I mean, this is, again, this inability to actually talk to people that you disagree with and this polarized echo chamber that these people put themselves in, that's why they think it's illogical, but they don't talk to people that they disagree with. They don't talk to ideologies that you disagree with. At every chance I get at the COVID rally, I love talking to these crazy people, like the COVID crazy people. Whatever. I love talking to these people. They showed up at the COVID crazy people showed up at like this Pan-African meeting in Toronto, and I thought that it was like the same for some reason. I thought it was the same. Anyway, you have to talk to these people. They're in the public sphere. You have a democratic duty to talk to these people.
he is trying to say that she's not a fascist and mocking the people that are calling her a fascist. So then what is the argument here?
The argument is that fascism, and it's always been the same argument, fascism is always a failed revolution. Instead of listening to the demos, instead of listening to the demos and the possibility of moving that towards communism, what we do is we lock ourselves in our ivory towers, pretend like we're smarter than everybody, laugh at people, right? Laugh at people for voting against their own interests. These insane, overly academic people, right?
Dabbled in every right-wing sort of far-right ideology you could think of.
And this is a key point that I want to point out. This gentleman right here says.
Earther. I don't know if he still is. He's a Islamophobe. I believe he even denied the moon landing at some point.
Flat earther, denied the moon landing. Alex Jones. You see how they lump them all in the same category, just like how the right wing lumps, all the people together when there's really a civil war between them. Look at how the left lumps the right together, when really the right, there's at least 3 or 4 5 understandings of what we can call the right. And since we're talking about Italy here, it's really important for us to study the work of Emilio Gentile. The Italian historian talks about how the convergences between communism and fascism.
Perché la famiglia fa così paura? C'è una risposta unica per tutte queste domande. Perché ci definisce, perché è la nostra identità. Perché tutto quello che ci definisce in questo tempo è un nemico, per chi vorrebbe che non avessimo più un'identità e che fossimo solamente schiavi, consumatori perfetti. E allora è sotto attacco l'identità nazionale, è sotto attacco l'identità religiosa, è sotto attacco l'identità di genere, è sotto attacco l'identità familiare. Non devo potermi definire italiana, cristiana, donna, madre, no? Io devo essere cittadino X, genitore 1, genitore 2, devo essere un numero. Perché quando sarò solamente un numero, quando non avrò più un'identità, quando non avrò più radici, allora sarò lo schiavo perfetto in balia della grande speculazione finanziaria, il consumatore perfetto.
And you have to read the work of Emilio Gentile to understand that point. I talk about that in my Ritual Traces series.
Yeah, he's a far-right conspiratorial crank.
Gotcha.
And it's funny that this guy is...
So look at how they lump them all together, right? He lumps up all these adjectives together. And then Holocaust denier, flat earth denier, global warming denier. Looks like why does the left do this? Because they are living in a polarized echo chamber, and they don't realize that they're up their own asses.
I'm always taken when I hear the classic narrative that the reason we have like modern neo-Nazis is because like Tumblr SJWs will nag you online if you use the wrong pronouns.
Sorry, that's not the reason why we have that. It's because we're not allowed to debate in the university. We're not allowed to have a public sphere. Our emotional relationships with one another have become commodified. I've talked about all these things. Look at how they strawman why the masses of people. Look at this one brain. He has one brain, right, against the masses of brains that are going against this. The masses are against these people. The masses are against these people. We're supposed to be Democrats. We're supposed to be raising consciousness here. But what are we doing? We're pretending like we're smarter than them. This is what the university produces. This is what the neoliberal university produces.
Because that's really what it is. Like, there are no COVID passports. We did that for like 3 weeks, basically. And I mean, 3 weeks overlapping in this country where everyone might have been doing it at the same time and not just...
Today, there might not be COVID passports. Tomorrow, there will be. Today, we're not okay with Facebook tracking our clicks. Tomorrow, we will be.
like haphazardly doing it in certain pockets of the country. And now it's even
gaslighting.
passports is mostly just a specter of a handful
professional
of people,
gaslighters. Watch my professional gaslighters video.
Who are immunocompromised, who are just like begging us as a country to stop being okay with mass death. But I mean, apparently that ship has sailed. But really, this is just like the new way of saying like people online who tell you that Richard Spencer is a Nazi are just making more people become Nazis. And, I got ejected from the left because I was just asking questions, like classic, refusal to take responsibility for one's own.
No. This is let's take responsibility for our complicity. Let's take responsibility for our complicity. We can't do that when we live in a power equals privilege society. When we live in an intersectional society, we can't take responsibility for our complicity.
Ideology or like the actual consequences of it, instead making it the fault of essentially just minorities who don't have any power.
See, minorities don't have any power. No, that's not true at all. We do have power. Minorities have enough power. Look at the victim ideology that plays out in this guy's head. Why? Because he's never been to a village in the middle of nowhere in the middle of Asia. He's only been. He's a product of American imperialism. This man is a product of American academic neoliberal imperialism.
There are no COVID passports anywhere, really.
This ideology wouldn't exist without the neoliberal university.
I haven't been asked. I live in New York City, and I haven't been asked to show my COVID vaccine information since I went to the theater. One time.
Yeah,
this all
like the Broadway theater, to be clear, not like the movie theater.
But
that's not the kind of fascism that we're talking about. We're talking about a covert kind of Patriot Act, just like how they read our meta information. That's what we're talking about. But look at how they minimize. This is classic abuser. I'm using the same kinds of post American Psychological associations to discuss this. These are the professional gaslighters. These are the professional abusers.
This is look what you made me do politics, which is a hallmark of the right wing, which is like the left is so horrible that I had no choice but to support the fascists. But she's not really a fascist. Don't worry about that. Even some.
The fascists are more inviting. They're more inviting to the possibility of creating the publics. That's what's so insane right now. Is that what? So why is it that? Can we ask the question? Why is it that the mass of people? Is it because they're a bunch of sheep? We have to understand their perspective of the villager mindset. If we don't, then fascism will grow. We have to be the empathetic ones. We have to be the ones that have to take responsibility.
World War II revisionism in this piece, and has been sparring with Jonathan Katz, who's like a great historian, about saying how if the United States' intervention in World War II essentially forced the Nazis to do this. Like that is what a conservative thought is that you made us. There was no choice for us to be as authoritarian and fascist and right wing as possible because of how you acted.
Actually, there's some case to be made for that. The idea that Germany wanted to participate in the colonialism that it never got a taste of European colonialism, whereas Britain and France and the rest of them, they were able to strengthen their empires based on the exploitation of the mass minorities of people. So the idea is that Germany also wanted a piece of that pie. Both the German Empire and the British Empire are both related to the Victorian Empire, Queen Victoria. They're all interrelated. The rulers of all these countries.
Not even just look what she made us do. It's a conflation of like, usually people online, we'll just say cancel culture now as like a conflation of cancel culture or like social or, informal sanctions with institutional power and institutional sanctions. And where we are now with the COVID pass. It's
not a conflation. It's the intersectionality has taken over all of, at least Canada has taken over all of our Canadian institutions.
Sports and the masking is entirely out of the realm of institutional sanctions and in the realm of social sanctions, people trying to just get you to do the right thing online, people reminding you that public health paradigms haven't changed, they just changed the rules. Those people are reminders of that once used institutional framework that people like this can like highlight. Oh yeah, see, they do have power, these wokes do have power, but no one has to mask. Like it's live and let live now, or live and let die everywhere in the United States.
Right. Oh, funny note too about, because we're on this topic of like COVID passports and freely being able to travel. Jimmy Dore's source for this, like we mentioned, is this far right winger, Peter Sweden, and a Hope Not Hate report found out more about Peter Sweden, and it turns out that Peter Sweden doesn't live in Sweden and hasn't for some time because his family is evading like $750,000 in taxes to pay to the Swedish government. So
that's fake news, Matt. He's not because it's not wide enough anymore.
Yeah. Listen, I'm sick and tired of these COVID passports telling us where we can and cannot travel. Also, the whole paying taxes thing, but mainly the COVID passports.
The left.
I mean, this is the crazy thing, right? I mean, you cite all of our conversations wouldn't have come out without Heidegger, right? We have to defeat the Nazi within us, okay? We have to defeat the Nazi within ourselves. We can't do that if we can't talk freely and openly about things like recessive genes or sexual relations, or if we can't talk freely and openly about these things, right? then there is no conversation to be had, and people retreat to their polarized echo chambers. They retreat to their identity politics. And that's what is happening. When you don't have a public sphere, what are we learning with our Arendt studies in my other playlist? We're learning that politics is a realm of civil war. And without that realm of civil war, without having a realm of civil war will be everywhere. Instead, even within our interpersonal relationships. So, what happens when civil war is within our interpersonal relationships? Do we expect from humans to not have a fight, fear, or freeze reaction to the civil war? And I'm trying to add the fourth F. If you've been watching my series, the fourth F to that is flock. The flock is the fourth fear response, right? When your identity is being attacked, what do? You fight, freeze, flee, or you flock. You go with your group like a herd mentality. You join the herd mentality. What are we doing with our continuous vicariously traumatizing, constantly bringing up the war of identity in every day? Why is that happening? It's to support white supremacy. That's the reason. Again, constantly, I'm being told constantly that I need to pay attention, right? If you live in this, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Look at the beyond stupidity. She started her conversation with beyond stupidity. These are people that are not well read enough in psychology, right? Pop psychology has taken over everything. Intersectional psychology has taken over everything. When really you have to look at the full psychology papers. The institution of psychology now is invading the institution of philosophy. Psychologisms have taken over philosophy completely. Every philosophy channel that I usually follow is now becoming psychologized because of the intersectional takeover, the intersectional American psychology takeover of every academic institution to repeat the same affirmative action social reproduction. What they call social reproduction, what I call social reproduction is a little bit different than what the real social reproduction is. What is affirmative action? Affirmative action is something that ideologically reproduces itself. Said before on this channel about Carrie Bourassa, health scientist Carrie Bourassa on immediate leave after scrutiny of her claims says she's indigenous. This person for 20 years was in charge of grant money in Canada. She was lying through her teeth, talking about all this power equals privilege crap, all this intersectionality crap, repeating everything that she was told to. This narcissist was put into a position of power, this abusive narcissist that forced her sister to lie about her own. Oh my God. If you look at the full story of that, I did a whole analysis on Carrie Bourassa. It wasn't very good audio, unfortunately. It was one of my first videos. The second one is a minority professor denied grants because he hires on merit. People are afraid to think. So if you're a brown person and you speak openly, honestly, you get fired. If you're a white person that repeats the intersection, if you look at her family, I mean, she's just, she was born darker, so she was like pissed off or something, and then so she became this like indigenous rights person. But she's Russian; she wasn't indigenous at all. So if you lie, if you're a narcissist that lies and cheats their way into positions of power, you get grant money, you get affirmative action support, you get 20 years of support, and free support, fake research. You do fake research projects. She did so many fake research projects. Okay, I should look up her fake research projects for another study. But if you're a professor that tells the truth, you say, I want to hire people based on merit. I think that people should be, affirmative. If you don't agree with affirmative action, you cannot be in a position of authority. Isn't that funny? Do you see how that socially reproduces itself? You cannot disagree with the system. Oh my goodness, it's just insanity. And we go beyond stupidity is right.
Documented history of Giorgia Meloni's fascism, the fact that she maintained a tricolor flame in the flag for her party as an open regard to fascism and Mussolini, the fact that she uses great replacement theory regularly and traffics and conspiracy theorists, has far-right stances against LGBTQ people and migrants in general, but the article begins with like a quote criticizing essentially Hillary Clinton praising Giorgia Meloni and
you see, there's just no acknowledgement of the incommensurabilities that exist within the intersectional communities. Like, the most patriarchal experiences that I've ever had were in gay strip clubs. You know, I work as a security guard. That's the most patriarchal I'm not even like that much of a manly man, but I've never seen more patriarchal attitudes, right? And I loved it there because I could freely say whatever I want. You know, homosexuality. It was freedom in the. So there's that. They don't talk about the fascism that exists in the LGBTQ community, the white supremacy that exists in the LGBTQ community. They just assume that we're all allies.
This prime minister in Italy.
Why did a lefty come out? Why did you have a lefty come out against COVID passports and you wouldn't have to worry about this happening? The problem is the person who's supposed to be the lefty is to the right of the person who you say is a fascist. That's your fucking problem. Same thing in America. Joe Biden is to the right of people you're calling fascists. Joe Biden is the authoritarian. Joe Biden is the fascist.
Well, hold on,
Joe Biden is the one who's screwing over.
Donald Trump literally closed down travel to the United States.
Biden isn't a fascist. Biden is a neoliberal. Okay, that's what. Biden is a neoliberal, and a lot of neoliberal politics are biopolitical in nature, which is fascistic, but it's not fully fascist. It's fascistic, let's say. Trump is the full-on fascist, let's say. Trump is the full-on fascist. He's the full-on right-wing guy.
During COVID, like he literally blocked people from being able to freely travel. What are you talking about? Joe Biden never did that.
Yeah, and the thing that Joe Biden continued, which should be the thing.
Look at these people defending Joe Biden.
That we're most
Why?
critical of in regards to
What is
COVID
this
policy
left?
being authoritarian is Title 42, which Trump implemented first, and Biden just continued way past the point that, I mean, it shouldn't have been in place whatsoever, but Biden continued it for quite a while.
These people's understanding of fascism is so effing childish. Like that, the mandates, which are gone now. Okay, so we beat.
The problem with the word fascism is that everybody's using it against each other, and it's lost all meaning.
Fascism. So
And who is responsible for that? Was it the right wing that made fascism meaningless? No, it's the left that, when you have two groups of leftists fighting each other, the TERFs and the SWERFs, they call each other fascists when they're both communists.
fascism. Where's the celebration for this stuff?
Or they both think that they're communists, and then they call each other fascists.
You can just roll it back. He literally came out and declared, I think
over.
last week or the week before, yeah, COVID, the pandemic is over.
You got what you
fascism.
want.
Dead.
They've got just like nothing. I mean, he's just gone too far down this road.
They've got
to-
exactly what they want.
Right. But, you know, to maintain like this kind of conspiratorial agreement, like this is the audience he's created, so we have to keep going. Does he mention this Hillary Clinton part later, Bradley, in this part? Yeah. Okay. Just want to make sure I got the time code there.
Also, Biden doing what Trump never could. Fauci is retiring. Fauci gone soon. That was under Biden, not Trump.
These people are so stuck in the American perspective. It's kind of like a polarized echo chamber in itself. When you're so secluded in American media.
Right.
Right.
As long as you can find a single account on Twitter that asks, please wear a mask when you're out, and that account has an avatar with like blue hair, then, you know, America is in the grips of wokeism in the minds of Republicans, because that's just the level of evidence you have to present to the, like, you know, the masses who believe this sort of conspiracy exists.
You see his disdain towards what is the masses, right? We used to call the wisdom of crowds is just not taken into account here. These people think that they're better than you.
And it's also helped by the fact that fascism for, you know, the United States is something that we very deeply root within a very specific portion of the early part of the 20th century with World War II and Nazi Germany. And people just haven't been keeping up with the rise of neo-fascism in Europe since the 1990s and late 80s. You know, in places like northern Italy and places like France with like Le Pen, and obviously his daughter is still, you know, giving it a go. And her granddaughter, I can't even. Marie Le Pen, I think, is Jean Le Pen's
Why? Why is it happening? Why is it happening?
daughter. Or, you know,
Look at the Prime Minister of Italy's speech. That's why it's happening.
rise of skinheads again in the 90s in England. You know, we like to put ourselves, I think, in the United States in this sort of geopolitical.
The justice who voted against abortion, that guy used to be a progressive leftist. If you look at the history of Clarence Thomas started his, you know, career as a progressive, as a leftist, and then soon, you know, 50 years later, he became, you know, this is what the left creates. The left creates this ongoing resentment within people, and then the people realize that the left is the problem. So Clarence Thomas spent 50 years in, you know, doing the things that he's supposed to do until he gets to a position of power, then he can fuck the left over. Look at the history of Clarence Thomas.
Bubble where we're not being affected by the same, you know, global austerity trends that is leading fascism to rise, you know, in combination with a complete like rolling back of workers' rights and, you know, labor protections in all these places.
Oh my goodness. The workers are voting for them. The workers that you just called the masses, the stupid masses, those are the same people that are voting for them. Why would they vote leftist when you just called them stupid?
All right, let's see what else. We'll wrap up this Dore segment here.
Of people you're calling fascists. Joe Biden is the authoritarian. Joe Biden is the fascist. Joe Biden is the one who's screwing over workers, students, and any citizen in
Pause real
America
quick.
had to be.
If Joe Biden's a fascist, shouldn't we be trying to appeal to him and bring us into our coalition? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, the Biden and the Boogaloo Boys together at last.
of Wall Street or a corporation. So the problem is you don't have a left party anymore.
My friend, look at what he said. If Joe Biden is a fascist, that means we have to bring him to the fold. These are the continuously traumatized perspective. It's a continuously traumatized, afraid, little, very small perspective, right? The masses of people are not just fascists. You essentialize them as fascist, and then you cannot talk to them.
They became right-wingers.
It was never really left party.
Guess what? So here's at the Atlantic, they called the return of fascism.
There was never really in the left party. You know, I used to be a libertarian guy, and when I was like 17 or something, I used to be a libertarian, and I used to have big debates against communists. And then slowly I became more of a leftist, more of a Marxist, more of a communist. Maybe one day I'll go through a history of how I changed my ideologies. But I remember then afterwards talking to the libertarians, or the neoliberals, which is kind of the same thing, the right-wing libertarians, and having a debate with them, and then they would tell me things like, oh, you were never a libertarian. You never believed in Hayek and von Mises. You never even read them properly, right? The same kinds of things happen now that I'm criticizing the left. It's like, oh, you were never really a leftist. You were never really a feminist. No, I was a feminist for 10 years. I was on the front lines of feminism. That's how I know that, these two groups of feminists, or various groups of feminists that are at war with each other, that I saw physically with my own eyes, right? Yelling at each other, calling each other misogynist. Not online. This is real life in Vancouver. I was there. I saw it. I was in the middle of it. I was like, I'm a male feminist in the middle of these two groups. Stop fighting each other.
You want to hear who's happy about her being elected? Hillary Clinton.
And Jimmy Dore.
Hillary Clinton says the election of the first woman prime minister in a country always represents a break with the past, and that is certainly a good thing. She says it's a good thing. Inside of an article that says it's fascist.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah,
So I guess he'll... I mean, I thought his whole thing is I hate Hillary. And
So the reason why Jimmy Dore's points just cannot get through is because these people are stuck in a power equals privilege mindset. They aren't able to think outside of their power equals privilege affirmative action mindset. Affirmative action is rooted in the very epistemology of how they are able to understand the world. So without looking outside of that ideological perspective, you can't understand what the hell is going on in the world, because you keep imposing an ideological perspective onto what's supposed to be a reality, what's supposed to be a real world, and that's a whole ontology conversation that we can have. But they project power equals privilege wherever they go, and then they can't understand Jimmy Dore, what he's trying to say.
And now
I'm pretty sure he's called her a fascist.
they're on the same wavelength here. If this is the case, the only thing there's no coherent narrative here. Just like I want.
Yes, there is no coherent narrative, but at least let's talk about all the contradictions at play, including your own.
Like 10 to 15 more seconds of what he even has to say.
Everyone calm down.
That's amazing. Hillary Clinton's on board for her.
Yeah, Jimmy.
But so here, I'll give you some of the reactions I saw.
Okay, so all right, fine. We're just gonna move past this, right? And then he puts a Mike Cernovich tweet up. Let's just to make this.
So here, I'll give you some of the
Okay,
reactions I saw.
why did they move past this? Misogynist attacks on Giorgia Meloni disgust me. She's the first female prime minister of Italy. If you oppose her, you hate women. You like the Iranian mullahs, and you think that, oh my god. Oy. This is a result of identity politics, right? They don't take responsibility. We don't, as academics, we don't take responsibility for 50 years. At least in the last 10 years, it's gotten really crazy for the social the words that we put out there, right? Normal people are using crazy words that they don't understand, that are from the university, right? Including me, right? I use, like, for example, emotional labor incorrectly all the time, and I do it on purpose, right? I use social reproduction incorrectly all the time because I'm doing it on purpose, because I'm trying to see the interjections. Interjections are more important than intersections.
All right, fine. We're just gonna move past this, right? And then he put a Mike Cernovich tweet up. Let's just make this as clear as possible, dude. That's the point. You got this platform by talking about how neoliberal democratic sellout.
Look at how she's responding. Look at this. The bees in her mind.
To make this as clear as possible, dude. That's the point. You got this platform by talking about how neoliberal democratic sellouts are ruining the party, and Hillary Clinton was the epitome of that. And he rode that wave, and he got a few misogynists in his audience which eventually became a much larger right-wing audience criticizing Hillary Clinton from at the beginning, a perspective that somewhat resembled a leftist critique, and one that we share here on the show. We do not like Hillary Clinton's vision for the Democratic Party. We do not like that she praises a fascist leader of Italy just because of her gender. That's something we stand against. So normally, if his argument was to make sense, right, like, he could say, and again, this is wrong, but that the left with its authoritarian COVID passports have turned people to fascists.
Okay, so this is her trying to make sense of Jimmy Dore. So that's very important. Let's
Which is wrong, but that the left with its authoritarian COVID passports have turned people to fascists, and that's wrong. And you know why that's wrong? Look at Hillary Clinton, who's praising this fascist. This is the person who's on her side and is praising her. That's not good. That's not good. That's why we should oppose this person. But he can't make that argument now because his audience is fully right wing, and this is where the rabbit hole that he's gone down. So he has to do like gymnastics in order to like just bring up Hillary Clinton as red meat, but it doesn't logically make sense with anything that he's trying to say. Baffling.
Well,
My friend, you've cut yourself off from the ability to see the rationality that's taking place in the minds of others. There is a logic that's happening there, right? You're not the only person that's using logic here. Other people have their own logic. Other people have their own reasoning for how they are thinking.
the thing that they've got immune to people calling them secret Republicans, right? Like they almost take that as a badge of honor, saying that we're just you guys are just Democrat partisans calling me that. But the thing about like being basically a Republican, which is I think what like Greenwald and Dore and stuff are, is that you're not far at
Greenwall. Look at all the people that they canceled. They canceled Agamben. They canceled Greenwall. These are all the people that are they're threatening to the system. Glenn Greenwald, okay, one of the best analyzers has been canceled. Okay, I don't even know if Glenn Greenwald even shows up on Democracy Now! Anymore.
Hillary likes her. Wait a second. No, for him it was, look, Hillary likes her. She can't be a fascist, even though I have made my bread and butter literally calling Hillary a fascist over the years. But he can't put two and two together, or he just doesn't want to.
and it's hard because like
Yeah, that's the problem with calling neoliberalism fascism. But that's not a problem that's specific to Jimmy Dore. That's a problem that's problematic for all the left. The other problem for the left is looking at neoliberalism and thinking that neoliberalism is deregulation, when in fact neoliberalism is the expansion of the state. Neoliberalism is the expansion of the carceral state in every aspect.
I can't believe he sourced Hillary Clinton as the anti-fascist. I mean, if it was Nancy Pelosi, maybe things would have been a little bit different. Then, Mamma Mia, Bella, Meloni, I love you. No, but
First of all, I have to condemn that sort of anti-Italian racism
Yes.
in my presence at least.
There's no place for that on this platform.
I am actually, people don't know this. I am actually, of all the different things I am most.
I have to look at them make fun, right? As if Italian Americans haven't gone through racism, as if Italian Americans haven't had their own issues with colorism. Look at their arrogance.
Italian. So
These are professional gaslighters. The university produces professional gaslighters on purpose. The neoliberal university produces professional
I guess
gaslighters.
I guess it makes your anti-Italian racism okay.
Matt Binder's the Candace Owens of Italians.
You can still do pizza face even if you're Italian. Is that what's calling you do like Italian blackface pizza face or like pasta? It doesn't matter. What unites Republicans is, I said it before, and I think I'll say it again, complex victimology. And the newest patch, I guess, on their victimhood quilt, especially amongst content creators online, is that they are actually in their hearts actually leftists. They're socialists or communists or liberals, classic liberals, whatever they call themselves. And they would otherwise be aligning with leftists or liberals or any number of like leftist coalitions, except for a series of key, grievances they have with leftists that basically is everything. Everything that defines leftists, whether it's, the redistribution of wealth from the most rich to the bottom classes, whether it's gender and racial equality, they just nitpick those things until they just become like full of holes, and all we can do is sit around and be stuck in the status quo. And it's just so tedious to watch people like basically day after day go through the list of things that leftists believe in, say that they want those things and they're leftists, and then go directly against them and their content and the things that they make.
I agree with this gentleman. What's the alternative here? The alternative is you believe in leftist ideals, you say anti-leftist ideals, you talk about the anti-leftist ideals. You have to talk about those anti-leftist ideals. That's called thinking to deal with the internal fascisms, the internal Nazisms that we have inside of us, all of us, right? That's the internal Nazism that creates Afro-pessimism. That's what Afro-pessimism is. It's an inability to talk about your internal Nazi, even if you're not white. So compare the person who is leftist at heart, but saying things that are anti-leftist, trying to deal with the anti-leftist ideas that are in their own hearts, in their own heads, in their own eyes. You can see it in her face. Look at it. It's in her eyes. It's in her face. Inside, right? You have to be able to deal with the Nazisms inside of you, and the only way to deal with that is to talk about it on the outside. But the problem is we are not able to talk about anything because we see that talking about it is itself the thing that it is, when it absolutely isn't. Compare that to the other leftists, these kinds of leftists. So the authentic leftists that are talking about their internal fascisms, they are fascists. But the other leftists who virtue signal, say all the things that you're supposed to say, but then in their daily ritualistic actions uphold the system of neoliberal colonialism, a system of commodifying our interpersonal relationships with one another, those people are not fascist. So which side do you want to be on? Okay, I want to be on the side that is internally leftist, externally talking about their fascism, dealing with their fascism, or do you want to be on the side that is externally, presentationally, Butlerian presentation culture, this censorship, participating in a censorship culture, participating in a platforming strawman culture. This is a platforming of strawman culture, participating in that power equals privilege kind of gaslighting that these people are doing. That's better. That's a better type of leftism than, and while in my daily actions I'm exploiting surplus capital.
Leftists and then go directly against them and their content and the things that they make. But
what's the difference between going against leftist thought in content and going against leftist thought in action? Which one is worse? Content, we need to talk, we need to criticize. That's what Hegel is all about, right? We have to talk about the side that, we have to talk about the thinking process of the side that we disagree with. Instead, what do? We label them as fascists, we essentialize them, we essentialize ourselves, we essentialize every position. Intersectionality is an essentialist perspective. Essentialism is the real fascism here. Essentialism is one of the key pillars of fascism. What? I am essentially this identity. These borders are, motherland, this kind of ancestral reverence that is essentialized based on a time frame. Right? My ancestry goes back 5,000 years in this, even though it's not actually probably not continuous. That's the kind of fascism that we need to be dealing with. Instead, we have to, these traumatized, vicariously traumatized people, these narcissists are the ones that are controlling the conversation and doing all the abusive moves and all the gaslighting moves.
I think what agrees with a lot of these people, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore, is that there's just like a whole catalog of their ideas that you can like put into like a frame of reference and go like, contextually speaking, it seems like you're a Republican. Yeah. Contextually speaking, based on the things that you have said over like, this career and videos and articles and posts on Twitter, it just seems like you're a run-of-the-mill Republican and you don't like Hillary Clinton, but because Hillary Clinton is actually also kind of Republican, you agree with her on this one thing. Yeah. And so it's not so confusing that you find yourself aligned with, Cernovich or Peter Sweden or Steve King, the race realist senator. It's not confusing if you just acknowledge that all these people are like on certain parts of the far right spectrum, from like the center to I guess the super far right. But if it's especially ego stroking to pretend like they're not over there with those far right people. They're actually secretly communists, and like it's all the other communists who can't understand it.
He also in like pretending that she isn't a fascist in this video relies on a very narrow definition of fascism, which is like the joining of the state with corporate America, and he like uses that as a.
That's never the definition of fascism. Fascism is anti-capitalist. Fascism is a form of anti-capitalism because, and we know this, because during the Holocaust, when the Nazis had to choose between the war machine and the killing camps, the death camps, they chose to not limit the resources to the death camps, to continue the death camps, to carry out that war machine instead of the war machine on the front lines. So they did a non-economic decision. And that non-economic decision is what differentiates and all of this, you have to read Emilio Gentile.
Standing up to the EU and Soros is not anti-fascism. And fascism also, he conveniently leaves this out, but has the hallmarks of demonizing certain groups and making them second-class citizens, and in some cases exterminating them. So that is very much within the scope of Maloney's ideology. In fact, I would say it's an operating part of her ideology.
That's one of the big differences between fascism and neoliberalism, is that fascism kills off the things that it disagrees with, just like the modern left today. Neoliberalism doesn't kill anything. It keeps you on a life supply in a biopolitical bare life world. And that's why Agamben, another guy who's a key thinker here, was canceled way before all of this stuff.
Maybe a failure of our education system to explain to a lot of people what fascism is, both like historically and also in the context of like, well, fascism.
It's always the failure of the education system, even though these people have the whole educational system in their pocket.
Nowadays know what fascists in the past did, so they don't do the same things that they do. Like neo-Nazis usually, unless they're like avowed like swastika ones, don't go around calling themselves neo-Nazis, because they know fascism is, despite what our media would have you believe, fascism, not communism, is the most disrespected and disregarded ideology of the 20th century. And it's only due to our our media and our exportation of our media and how lazy it is, allowing for fascist talking points to be laundered into our public discourse.
Yeah, what's even worse is that you can have fascist talking points in our discourse, but in fact you can have a fascist ideology behind your supposed progressive ideology. And for that you can look at Gabriel Rockhill's work.
As just run-of-the-mill financial talk, or just run-of-the-mill like Republican or like conservative ideology. For some conservatives it is, but just letting it just be laundered into our airwaves, it has been a slow and steady like degradation of our the ethics of our systems. It's true, I think, that some fascists would not see themselves as fascists because people have pointed out that in some ways fascism is just what you call it when imperialism and the projects of imperialism are turned towards groups that we see as being slightly more worthy and more valuable. I think that there are some people who instinctually feel that fascism and imperialism is okay for certain groups. They just disagree with those groups are, and for some people, fascism and imperialism and all of what they consider to be government overreach only really matters when it's happening to them and people who they view as worthy of sympathy. So
the ahistoricism in terms of like how fascism is being reintegrated into the minds or rewritten for.
And again, we're talking about, in my Leo Strauss series, if you're following that, we're talking about the excessive historicism and how excessive historicism smuggles with it a universality while pretending to not be universal.
Especially in the working class, between that suburban class of worker and the service workers who traditionally exist in our economy to service them, because it's able to it's a good wedge issue that allows people to be convinced that their needs are in direct opposition to the needs of the rest of the working force. Needs for.
I don't understand how you can make these arguments on the one hand and denounce the masses on the other. I don't understand how these people can can think like this. Well, actually, I do. It's because of the power equals privilege narrative that I used to spew out and think as well. So if we want to get out of that power equals privilege narrative, please follow along with my Leo Strauss and Hannah Arendt series. Thank you so much.